So I've added that last flower in, and there we have our finished spring wreath. So beautiful, it just gives me positivity and energy, which is what we all need at this time of year. So we're making a spring wreath today, and it may be spring, but I make wreaths any time of year. I think traditionally people think they're for Christmas, but they're really not. There's no reason why you can't make them, you know, January right through to December, and they're great for like parties or Easter's coming up. So I often play with scale, and I might have like a really large one if I was doing like a gathering outside, or then I might have really mini ones to have on plates when I'm inside. So it's just a lovely craft, and it's a brilliant skill to know, and it's also great to do with children as well. So to help with longevity, I am going to use some dried ingredients as well for more pops of colour. So here I've got some dried mimosa, which was just in season, and I just buy lots of it and we dry it because it's brilliant to use in projects throughout the year. We've got some mountain daisies here, which are just so delicate and really pretty and will kind of speak to the white of the narcissus and the viburnum. And then we've got some lonas here, which very similar to Achillea, and it just gives that pop of colour. So it's always great to use fresh and dried if you didn't want to keep replenishing your fresh cut flowers. So the first thing we want to do is attach our reel wire, R-E-E-L, used a lot in floristry in wreath making. So all you need to do is to get the end and loop it over, and then you want to wrap it around. So probably leave about 2 or 3 inches, you don't need to leave too much, and then you loop that around, and that will basically make sure that nothing goes anywhere. This won't come off. This is really, really strong wire. So that is how I attach it. And then I'm going to begin by mossing the base. So as I said, you need to make sure that there is some water support for the stems you're putting on, which is why sphagnum moss is so great. It actually really helps the forest floor retain that water. So you don't need to have too much, just like a handful. And it is almost like Velcro, it will kind of stick to itself. So I get a kind of bundle like that, front and back. You want to cover it all, because then you can miss the back as the days go on, and that will make sure it replenishes the water intake. And then you get your wire, and I'm just looping around, probably at intervals of about 1 inch. And the reason I leave it inch is this actually, if you felt this, it's very heavy. So the more wire you put on, the more weight you're going to add to the wreath base. So we want to keep everything quite light. And as I said, you can see, you know, that those bits in between aren't going anywhere. So that's really all we need. And we just keep on going. So now we've covered our base. That actually looks really lovely. I know many people who would just be very happy with that. The process of making a wreath is making small little bunches and replicating them and placing them on the base. That is essentially the process. But what I like to do first, especially if I've cut things in my own garden, is to put everything in variety order. You can see I've already done that with the vessels around me, but I'm just going to do that with all the ingredients that I took from the garden. And then this is where the creative bit comes in. If you want it to look very uniform, you could either have every bunch having exactly the same amount of stems per variety, or like me, if you like things more wild and natural, you know, you've already got your creation, so we know it's all going to work together. So I probably have little differences between each bunch. So for size, what you want to do is, I think that's a really good size for this size wreath. You could make it extra long. This is where your personality comes through. But I think something kind of like 15 centimetres will act very good for a base of this size, which is about 10 inches. You have to remember, once you start putting your bunches on, everything will escalate and will get bigger. So now I'm just going to start building my first bundle. So what you want to do is, if there's a long stem like this, you want to make sure that you elongate how much you get out of each branch. So instead of kind of like cutting that and disposing of that, I would cut it there, but then put that aside, because that is still perfectly good to use. And so what you want to do is almost create a fan. If you think of your hand, you don't want your bunch to be tight like that. You want it to fan out. And then I'm also being very mindful about the order I place things into. So say if I get some of the slightly larger leaves, what I wouldn't want to do is if I put the hebe behind that, it is completely obliterating it. So it's much more aesthetically pleasing and everybody gets a chance to shine if I put it on the front. So I'm always thinking about texture, leaf density, what's going to work together, just being a bit mindful of that. So I'm going to create my little fan. So I'm going to start with that at the back, and it is always good to have the hardier or more woody stems at the back to really act as that structure against the base. Then I'm going to add in a little bit of hebe, and you can just see the colours already work really well. And then I think I'm going to add in maybe a little bit of pizzicorum. So this is where it really helps if you've already selected great ingredients, because really this is what I say when you're working with nature, you're just adding to it. So you can see the difference. If I have that, already looks great. If I add that in, it just really makes it zing. So I've got my fan there, and then what I want to do is also have a little piece that's in the bottom. So if you do that, you don't ever want to put all the stems at the same height because it's just going to feel very flat. You want to kind of stagger things down. So I'm going to do that. I always do a little kind of piece in the middle that's slightly more staggered down. You'll see as we start adding on, that will just create lots of depth, lots of layers and lots of texture rather than just like big bunches at all the same height, hiding all the ingredients. So I'm going to cut off the ends there. You don't need to be too prescriptive about removing foliage, but I just tend to, because foliage that's underneath that's not going to be seen, it's just going to suck up more of your water. Then what I'm going to do is maybe add in some of the daisies. And again, you can see the difference that brings to that bunch. And with the flowers, with the fresh flowers, I'm actually going to add those in last. Sometimes I like to do that because then I've kind of finished the display and I can see exactly where the space needs to work. You might want to do it as you go. It's completely up to you. I'm going to add those in at the last minute. So there we've got a really nice balanced bundle. You can see it fans out. We've got something smaller in the middle. And that's a perfect kind of height. So I want to make mine uniform. So I'm going to make sure that every bunch is like that similar height. So what you want to do is attach bunches, but you want to stagger them. So my first one would go there, slightly towards the inside of the wreath base, and the next one will go slightly towards the outside. So it's that rather than like sitting on there, it's just very subtle. So it would be one bunch there, the next bunch would go here, and then your next bunch would go there, almost like a zigzag. You want to make sure that the angle is of the circle, so that guides you. So you want to make sure that you're putting your first bunch near where you've got your wire, because that's what we're going to use to wrap it around. And I do want to make sure that the ends are actually in the moss. I would put the wire over once, twice, probably that's it. As I said, it's super strong. If it was extra woody or you were using much kind of much bigger stems or much wider stems, then maybe 3. And you don't want to pull too tight. As I said, we're going to be adding in the main flowers at the end. So if we pull it too tight, we can't use that scaffold and structure. So you just want it secure, but you don't want to kind of really put it tight. The only time we're going to do that is at the very end. So now I'm going to make my next bunch. I'll make it slightly different. I might start adding in the vine now. And again, as I did before, I'm going to cut that into 2 pieces. So I've got one bit, and this size is perfect for that middle that I was talking about, your kind of middle lower fan. And then the other bit I cut before, I'm going to use as like the backdrop. Actually, might put a bit of rosemary in there. Really gorgeous. And again, put that just in the bottom. This is very similar to how we would make a buttonhole. So if you think about that, it's just a huge buttonhole. So I'm just going to cut that off there, slightly remove everything. So where do you put your second bunch? You wouldn't want to put it on top. You can see that's completely covering what you've just done. You wouldn't want to put it too far away because you can see the gap there. You can see the moss. So we just want enough to cover the end stems. Slightly towards the outside is there. So we still want it on the base there. And as you can see, I'm just covering those. So I haven't covered up those gorgeous daisies. But you can see that in 2 bunches, we've got a lot of coverage. And it already looks so beautiful. So now I'm going to keep on going. So I've just continued to add the bundles on. So we've got a base that's half covered here. But I've actually got one I've made earlier. Always wanted to say that. So here we are. So this is a nearly finished wreath. So I've got one more bundle to put on. So you get to the end, what do? Either you can make 2 small bunches or 1. I'm going to make 1. But what you want to make sure is that you really tuck it under that first bunch that you put in. So I'm going to add in my final bunch. So it really just depends on how you're going. Make a judgment of whether you think you need one larger, one standard bunch or two smaller ones. It's really up to how your design is and what you've used. So I'm going to continue on here. Still replicating what I did before. Fanning out. Putting a bit of the rosemary. And maybe just a final bit of the lowness at the back. So there's my final bunch. So I'm going to lift that first one up. You don't want to be too forceful. You don't want to disrupt it too much, but you should be able to just lift it up. And there you can see there's a really nice gap. So I'm just going to tuck all those stems underneath. So you might find this a little bit challenging at first if it's your first one. You just want to hold it back and then pop the real Y over. You want to make sure that you don't put it on top of any of the ingredients of that first bunch. I'm just going to lift that up the way. So do 1, 2, and I will do 3 because this is the final fixture point. And then all you do is you get that first bunch and pop it back down. So you can see there we have no idea where that join is. That's exactly what we want. Now add in my final flourishes. So you can actually add in like catkins, branches. I think that actually at this time of year almost looks like a nest. I pruned these a couple of weeks ago, so I just keep everything from the garden because you never know when they're going to add something to a floral arrangement. So I'm just going to add them in there. So I'm going to now add in the hero flowers, such as the narcissus. So you just want to cut them there, and all that wire acts as that scaffold. So you can literally lift up any bunch, pop it in, you'll feel where that wire is, and then add it in. And it's as easy as that. So as I said, these will be, these don't have that much longevity, great for a day, but then you can just simply pop them out. And that's true with any wreath, any time of year. Some of the ingredients will last a long time, others will fade much quicker. So you can just keep the base or keep your, evergreen foliage, take the bits out that need replenishing. So I'm not going to use a few. You can see the hellebore heads are actually really quite large. So I don't want it to overpower the design. So I'm just going to add one more in. And I'm just going to look for one that's maybe a slightly contrasting colour. The other two I put in are quite dark. I think I'm just going to add in a few more narcissus. Again, if you put something white near the burgundy, it will lift exactly what's going on darker in front of it. So that's kind of purposefully like that. So I've added that last flower in, and there we have our finished spring wreath. So beautiful. It just gives me positivity and energy, which is what we all need at this time of year.